morning, lovelies! Today we are talking about my top 10 least favorite medieval fantasy tropes. Now what is medieval fantasy, you may ask? Well, medieval fantasy is a subgenre of fantasy that is based off of medieval Europe. It is not to be confused with historical fantasy that would take place in actual medieval Europe. Rather, the world building of medieval fantasy is inspired or based off of that setting. Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones are the two biggest examples of this type of genre. And as much as I love the genre of medieval fantasy, it has its faults. So let's get into the tropes. Number 1, the Chosen One. This trope is officially going out of style, and I could not be happier. It's just lazy writing. How can I possibly get my teenage protagonist to handle adult politics and battlefields and actually defeat the Dark Lord? They're the Chosen One! Chosen by who? Chosen One! It can be done well. The reincarnated Chosen One is probably the least offensive here, but it's weighed out by all the crap. Number 2, overpowered characters who do not earn their abilities. There is nothing enjoyable about things coming too easily to a protagonist. Despite what the vast amount of fluffy fanfics out there would have you believe, we want to watch our characters suffer. We want to see them fail, try again, fail some more, struggle, and then finally succeed. Having the protagonist master 50 spells by chapter 3 just doesn't cut it. It's the same problem as the Chosen One trope, but worse. Lazy writing. Number 3, the old white dude mentor. Yes, it's the demographics rather than the mentor character itself. It's one of those instances where real life has soured fiction for me. Look, as much as I love Gandalf and the mentor archetype as a whole, I have had far too many real life experiences with old white guys trying to tell me what to do because they think they know better, when it turns out they know nothing at all. Your age, skin tone, and dig do not automatically make you an expert in any subject, or even better at a subject than anyone else in the room. Some of my fellow writers have it worse. Jenna Moreci is a very successful author with multiple best-selling books out there, and she is still getting offers from older guys who want to mentor her even though they haven't published so much as a short story. The old white dude mentor also tends to have his life under control and has no narrative arc, and thus they are very boring, even when they die. So if you can't give me a mentor character who isn't a different demographic than what I'm used to seeing, like a woman or a queer person or even a kid, then at least give them a narrative arc that's kind of interesting, so like I'm engaged with them and I'm rooting for them to change. I don't know, it could be fun. Number 4, assassin fantasy. It's not so much one of my least favorite tropes, I just don't gravitate toward this genre. The assassins in fantasy tend to be very overpowered, ultra competent, while also having the standard woe is me, I'm a monster, I have no friends or loved ones kind of attitude that I find very annoying. Maybe I'm just not reading the right type of assassin fantasy, I don't know. Also, I'm a pacifist, so there's a bit of an ideology clash going on there. And these assassins also usually have plots that center around revenge, which is just... They also tend to lead straight into my next least favorite trope. Number 5, morally gray anti-heroes. These can be written well. I mean, I was as obsessed with Game of Thrones as the next fan, and I love me some complex three-dimensional characters. This is just so overdone. And a lot of authors run the risk of going overboard. I could not get into the sequel of The Poppy War. As much as I loved that book, after the main character blew up a country, I just couldn't root for her anymore. Oh, I feel so guilty and tormented for what I did. Yeah, bitch, you should. You killed millions of people. I don't feel sorry for you. A lot of anti-hero stories also have this attitude that true heroism or just general selflessness and community is childish and stupid. As if the whole reason that humans get together in groups and form societies since we became humans is to rip each other off rather than look after each other. A quick commercial break before I continue. I have updated the merch on my Patreon page. In addition to sneak peeks of my own works and discounts for professional manuscript critiques, patrons of certain tiers get this Good Morning Lovely sticker, and higher tier patrons get the Good Morning Lovely's coffee mug. My Patreon link is in the description of this video, so check that out for the goodies. Alright, back to the tropes. Number 6, no powerful women because it's not realistic for the time period. And every single one of them has been or will be sexually assaulted if we're in grimdark land. There are 2 problems with this. One, in medieval Europe, even though women did not have nearly as many legal rights and protections as men, they still did stuff. They ran businesses, especially if they were widows. They were princesses and queens and noblewomen who participated in politics. They were criminals that decided that the patriarchy could fuck right off, and so they played by their own rules. And number two, it's a moot point anyway because you're writing a fantasy story. The world, history, and culture are completely made up here. You can absolutely use medieval Europe as an inspiration or a launching point, but you are under no obligation to strictly adhere to the actual historical standards of the time, and pretending you are just reveals yourself to either be a coward and or a sexist asshole. You can have your society be bound by the technology and architecture of the medieval period while still making up completely different laws, government structures, and gender roles. You're the author, this one's on you. And number 7. Same for people of color. Again, if you're trying to hide behind the historical accuracy argument, there were people of color running around Europe. They were the minority, sure, but they were there. Africa and Europe share the Mediterranean Sea and have a long history together spanning back to before ancient Rome. Same with Europe and the Middle East. In fact, it was the end of the medieval period that the Mongols invaded Europe. And since you're writing fantasy, if the magic system involves any kind of long-range communication or travel, like teleportation, you have even less of an excuse. Number 8, secret royalty. We can't have women with political or martial power because that's not realistic. But we can have secret royalty living as peasants, even though there is no historical evidence backing that up. People don't hide princes on farms. If a royal family did have to bail and protect their heir from a coup or invasion or whatever, they did so by going to foreign countries friendly to their cause and hiding behind the big castle walls and armies. This would allow the heir to gain more allies before leading the army to reclaim their throne. Also, not telling the person that the royalty is just stupid. They need to know why all these assassins and evil minions keep trying to kill them. And if the end goal is for them to rule a country, then they're going to need to know a lot more about economics, politics, and world history than what's going to be available for them in a potato farm. Number 9, the classic damsel princess. I mentioned in my favorite medieval tropes video how much I love me some princesses and queens because they are women in positions of power, often in a world that is trying to take that power away, providing natural conflict in a suddenly far more relatable protagonist. What I don't like is when the princess uses none of the resources available to her and winds up kidnapped or held hostage, and still fails to use those resources to at least try to save herself or help the heroes trying to rescue her, or use her proximity to the villain to hurt or manipulate him, or anything. Just do anything. She just sits there like a lump. Eventually the hero rescues her and she's treated like a reward. Ah yes, you successfully did the plot, hero. Now you get to marry this person with as much personality as a wet towel and become a king, because that's totally how feudal systems work. And number 10. Plot armor. I like happy endings. In fact, I demand happy endings, or at least bittersweet hopeful endings, in pretty much every piece of media I consume, possible exception of horror. But it has to be earned. Plot armor is when a character should absolutely 100% be killed, but they're not because they're an important character. It tends to be really obvious when the character has plot armor when every rule of logic, both external and internally established in the story, they should be dead. And it's even worse when a different character who doesn't have to die, dies. Because the writer wants us to feel bad. Like, you're really showing the hand of the author here. It is not specific to medieval fantasy, of course, but it does tend to be more obvious in this genre. The sorcery of sword and sorcery is magic plot armor, apparently. Tell me your least favorite medieval fantasy tropes in the comments, and be sure to check out my tropes playlist for more. I will see you next time. Bye, lovelies.